Hello, all. Welcome. If you know one thing about David Mead, it's that he loves Depeche Mode. And
That wasn't Depeche Mode.
Oh, really? Yikes! Spotify tells me it's Depeche Mode, but
Is it really? I didn't think it was. I could be wrong. Clearly, I don't love it that much.
We'll have to find out what your favorite Depeche Mode song is. Feel free to ask David Mead questions in the chat about his favorite music, his favorite Depeche Mode song. Please hop into the comments. Let us know that you are here, where you're joining us from in our world today. Here with hey Ali, thanks very much. I'm glad we have one LinkedIn user excited for this. We don't know who you are over there, but feel free
Cynthia, my new friend. I'm so excited.
Oh, wonderful. Whoever just said, "Oh my God, I'm so excited for this," feel free to let us know who you are because it says LinkedIn user. I'm Stephen Shedd here in Toronto. I'm here with my very good friend, David Mead, who's based in Salt Lake City. Hey, Sam. We are so pumped to be with you today. If it weren't for David Mead, my life would be very different. I think David thought that I was a bigger deal than I was. It was not a big deal. And I was quite young, but I guess I convinced him otherwise. But he decided to take a risk on me, and he invited me to join Simon Sinek's team. And David Mead and I started by doing the Start With Why podcast, which we had I think 16 episodes, David, and we had a ton of fun. And I taught you so much about sports. And
which I've retained all of it.
Yes. I'm just so delighted that I get to do this with David because he's such a great personal friend of mine. He's taught me so much, and we complement each other. So we're going to talk about trust, about culture. What are the actions that lead to trust? What are the actions from leaders and everyone that creates a strong culture? And yeah, I mean, we've called this Bridge the Trust Gap, because I think there's sometimes a dissonance or a disconnection between what leaders say their culture is and how their people actually experience it. So David and I are going to speak about and get some questions and interactions and ideas from you on how we can bridge that gap and make our cultures at work and beyond strong. Anything else, David, you want to share before we start to dive in and chat about these? And love to see all these people from all over. Hi, Anna. Hey, Lindsay. Hello, Natalie, David, John.
Yeah, this is great.
Catalina in Melbourne. Beautiful. Hey, Charlie. So good. So yeah, David, your opening words, good sir.
It feels like a lot of pressure. So I'll start by, I guess, saying the thing that has been on the back of my mind for a couple of years now. I feel, and everything that I talk about and everything, a lot of the stuff I think we're going to discuss today, Stephen, and I know that you have had similar experiences throughout your life and career, but everything I talk about, I've experienced myself. So the way that I sort of talk about this is there's the science, there's the data, and then there's the heart, right? Like the science and the data is out there and it supports everything that you and I talk about. And sometimes I'll use that stuff to support for some of those skeptics that don't believe it. Mm-hmm. But my real intent is, how do I get people to connect with when they have felt this stuff themselves? Because that's when it's real. I mean, you can read a study, you can, read the science, you can understand how the brain works, and you can intellectually get it. But until you have that feeling of like, oh, I remember that manager, like, oh, I remember that job, or like, that's when we really connect with it and we're like, yep, I get it, right? Yeah. And so that's really where this is all coming from. And so with that sort of background, I'll just say that to me, I feel like the default at work is skepticism and disconnection. Like, you have to prove to me that you're worth my trust. You have to prove to me that you're worth getting to know. And I hate that. And I get it. Like well, and we can talk about some of the reasons that kind of stuff happens, and why that's the default. But it kills me because I don't believe that that's our default as human beings.
No.
Like, we're all born depending on and vulnerable to the rest of the world, and trusting, even though we don't really, consciously realize it, but we're putting our lives in the hands of other human beings. And that's how we grow up, as kids. Like, we both have kids. Our kids look to us for protection. They look to us for help and for support and for all those things. And they will willingly forgive us and trust us and believe us, and like all of these things. We don't have to prove to them that we're worthy of the incredible role of parenting that we have. And so I believe that, like, that's the default when we start life. But counterintuitively, even though we realize, or we recognize maybe that that's how it works, we've built this societal structure where it's completely the opposite. Where all of a sudden now it's all about competition. It's all about being better than somebody else, or beating somebody else out for a job, or getting more money than somebody else, or, like, whatever it is. And it starts in school, right? You got to be the best grades. You got to wear better clothes than this person. You got to be popular. You don't want to be one of the weird kids. Like, all of this stuff, it's like, it's all getting flipped around. And all of a sudden we're on our guard. We put up walls. We protect ourselves. We don't trust people. We're skeptical if they try to be nice to us. I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, I was the biggest nerd you can imagine. Even bigger than I am now.
Yeah, please go on.
I had two classes, between two specific classes every day, I would obviously take the same hallways, right? And there was this kid that passed me going the opposite direction every single day. And every time he saw me, he would say, "You're a stud." And I was like, whatever. Why are you being mean? Why are you being rude to me? Why are you rude? Like, every day, "You're a stud. You're a stud." And I was skeptical, because he was kind of like, he was older. He was a couple of, grades above me. And I was skeptical of somebody being kind to me. What the heck is that all about? Right? Turns out he was literally, I think he maybe just recognized that I was a nerd that had no friends, and just was genuinely trying to be nice.
Nice.
We ended up being amazing friends. He came to my wedding, like, but it's just that stuff. Like, why do we put up that wall? I hate it. So in my idealistic brain, the world can be different. Work can be different. And I know we're never going to get there, but to me, it's worth working toward it for the rest of my life and inspiring other people to do the same, because I know that there are people like that out there. There are people like Chris that just want to be kind and want to be nice. There are, leaders and managers and people that with no position or title in an organization, that just have influence, that just love the people around you because that's who they are. So that's what I want to try to encourage and promote, and help people to realize that we all have that stuff inside of us. And I think for some of us, it's just buried a little bit deeper than others.
Yeah. And Chris is that guy in high school who called you a stud and meant it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure what he saw in you. But it's so interesting. I mean, we are biologically wired. Like, remember, let's look back to the origins of our species. We lived in groups, communities of 100 to 150 people. That's where we came from. And so we're biologically wired that when we see other, like, have our guard up. And so you have this random person who you don't know from Adam who walks by you and calls you a stud. And so your sort of initial instinct is skepticism, which is like biologically normal. But with the consistency of his action, you're like, wait a second, maybe he means it and he's not mocking me.
Yeah, because like, he invited me to go camping. It wasn't just he said that every day and like then snickered with his friends. Like, he followed through on it. And rather than just saying it, he actually followed up and did more to help me see that he really meant it.
Nice. I'm sure you built a bit more of a relationship before he invited you to go camping. It wasn't like the third day and then camping and you're like, who's this stud who's inviting me to go camping? I see, Lindsay, this quote you put in here, change moves at the speed of trust. I believe that's a Stephen Covey. Is it Stephen M, Stephen R, Stephen MR? What are his initials, David? I know we both know.
I think it's MR.
Yeah.
The younger one. Yeah.
Yeah. Stephen M.R. Covey wrote the book The Speed of Trust. So that could, Lindsay, be from Stephen M.R. Covey. Love that. Keep any reflections, questions coming here. I'm loving this.
Yeah. Great comments, everybody. We like stop for 10 minutes and read all the comments. I don't want to miss them all.
Yeah, this is great. And yeah, I mean, I get a sense in some respects we're in a bit of an echo chamber here, in the sense that you and I think people here realize that treating people with respect and decency is good for business, particularly in the long run. Doesn't mean that sometimes we take time and we move a little bit slower, but it means that when we have that trust, we do have speed, as Lindsay said. I mean, the way that I view trust, and David, I'd love your point of view on this, is the time to build trust is when we're not in chaos. If we, by all means, sometimes if you join an organization and you're joining into chaos, it's, come and join and good luck. But for so many of us, as we've gone through COVID, and organizations have had to make drastic changes and shift, the time to build trust is when the waters are calm, such that when the waters are rough, we're not relying upon trust we haven't built yet, that people are willing to give of their discretionary effort, because when the leader says run through that wall, we believe in why we're doing it, and we believe in them, and that they're not sending us into harm's way and danger for no good reason, that we're working together to create a better future.
Yeah, when you say that, a couple of things pop into mind. I think, mutual friend of ours, Rich Davini, I asked him specifically about this a few years ago. And I said, you look at the military context, and, military stuff is interesting because it's life or death. It's very stark. It's, sort of, I know not what most of us deal with on the daily, but I asked him, I said, when you have a senior officer barking orders at you and like yelling at you, how does that work? And he said exactly what you're talking about. He said, in moments of, when it's life or death, when it's a critical time, that's when the commands come out, and that's when you get that sort of stereotypical military sort of demeanor. But the reason that works,
more command and control in those moments. But yeah,
exactly. But he said the reason that works is because of what you just said, because of the trust that has been built on all the times that are not those life or death situations. So you trust that this person has your best interest in mind. And when they say jump, or they say go, or they say do whatever, you do it because you trust that they care about you, even though it doesn't sound like it in that moment. So without context, that command and control situation might sound like that's really horrible leadership, but you got to take the whole context into account.
Yeah.
The second thing that popped into mind too, sort of different, we can go down whichever thread makes most sense or wherever the interest lies for the people that are on with us. Lost it. Give me a second.
It'll either come or yeah.
You said we're talking in an echo chamber, which I think is true, right? I mean, we get in a vacuum like this, and you and I have seen this for years. You get into you go into do a keynote or a workshop, or
did we just lose David? We may have just lost David. Can you guys hear David, or is it me? Oh, there you are.
Hey, here I am.
Okay.
Where'd you lose me?
We're in the room, keynotes, giving talks. That's what you were saying.
Okay, so when you're away from your day-to-day, right? It's you hear about this stuff and you're like, oh yeah, totally get it, totally agree. Yep, that's what love it. That makes sense. But then we go back and how many of us, rhetorical question, myself included, are not actually doing that all the time? And so it begs the question, like, well, why not? If we know that this is the better way to lead, the better way to operate, why aren't we doing it? And this is where I pair my idealism with my realism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I have this ideal that I want to continue to promote, but the realist in me knows that we're human, so we're going to screw it up. Two, there are very real pressures that just take priority over doing some of this good human stuff that we know is the right way to lead, right? I was having a conversation earlier today with somebody who's on right now. And, with a great company who cares about people, their heart's in the right place, they do incredible things for their people. And yet when the numbers are low, or when, there's a critical time, when, they were very, very heavily impacted by COVID. So when these pressures are on, sometimes those things sort of take a back burner because we don't have time for that stuff right now. We have to, our hair's on fire. We got to fix that.
Yeah.
And while I get that, and at certain times there will be that imbalance, but I think there's a recognition of, hey, we have an imbalance and work to fix it. And secondly, recognizing that a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, again, when it's nurtured in those times of more calm, can actually help in the times of crisis, because people will step up. They'll give discretionary effort. They'll give more of who they are and their intellect and their genius to help solve a problem when they're bought in and when they trust their leader or the organization that they're a part of.
Yeah. I know a mutual dear friend of ours is Peter Docker, not Peter Drucker, Peter Docker. And he has a saying, which is relationship is the foundation of what we can accomplish. And when we have, I mean, vulnerability isn't just a big capital V word that Brene Brown talks about. It's good for business because, you know, David and I have a trust and safe relationship. He and I do a lot of work together. We have vulnerability, meaning that we feel safe to expose and wear our strengths and weaknesses on our sleeves. David has very openly and willingly shared with me, here are my blind spots and weaknesses. Here are how I see what your strengths are. And he and I make a better team together because we know of one another's strengths and weaknesses, which means when it goes into doing work or being faced with uncertainty, I know when I should lead and I know when I should definitely take a seat back, and same with David. Any comments or thoughts there, DM, before I have another question for us, and then amazing comments and questions coming in here. So please keep it coming.
No, I love it. I'd love to address some of these questions and comments that are coming in, because I think they're really great.
Awesome. There's one here that came in from Alejandro Ale. I'd love if you guys could define trust and develop what does it look like in an organizational versus a friendship or life context, if it's the same basic concept or not, and what role does warmth and competence play into building it? Boom. DM, do you want to start? Do you want me to share a couple ideas first? Up to you.
Go ahead, and I'll build on anything that I feel needs to be built on.
Great. And I reserve the right to build upon what you build upon. So the way, Alejandro, that I define trust is a belief that another party has your best interests at heart and in mind. Like, I know that David isn't trying to manipulate me. I know that if he has certain vested interest, he will be transparent with me enough to say, hey, this is why I'm doing this. I trust that his intent to be sincere and genuine. I've also heard trust broken down into sincerity, competency, and consistency. So sincerity was that first one that I mentioned, which is I believe David to be sincere and genuine. He's not trying to manipulate or take advantage of me. He's being true in who he is, authenticity. And that's through experience. David has this equation that we shared in the invite that he can unpack more. But the equation he shared, I hope I get it right, David, that it's expectation plus experience equals trust, which I'm sure you can speak more to.
Yeah.
Next is competency, that I believe that you can actually deliver upon what you say you will, whether that's through you or through a team. And then consistency, you consistently deliver upon what you say you will. And I think, Alejandro and all, a big thing with trust as well is context. If God forbid I'm in a burning building and a firefighter shows up, I'm going to trust them. I trust that when one light says green going north, that the other lights going east-west are going to be red. Like, that's immediate, like, initial trust. When it comes to friendship and work and relationships and sort of normal day-to-day, trust is drops in a bucket, and there's one action that can happen that can spill that entire bucket. Trust ought to be built, maintained, and repaired if needed. But yeah, for the most of us, trust is drops in a bucket. But I do think that leaders go first and trust first. I've never met a great leader who says, I will trust my people when they show to me that they're worthy of it. You start with a baseline level of trust. And if people behave in a way that erodes that trust, that the leaders among us go and have some hard conversations around feedback where trust was impacted, and works to build it. And if after repeated interventions it doesn't build, you can offer that person up to the competition. Let them wreak havoc over there. David, anything else to add on that?
Just picking up on what you said about drops in a bucket. Another way to think about it that I like is trust deposits. So every time we do something that builds trust, it's like a bank account, right? We put deposits in there, and then inevitably we're going to screw up. We're going to do something, intentionally or not, that sort of makes a withdrawal from that. But if we don't have the deposits in there, then we're going to be overdrawn. And that's where the problem really comes in. When we've been consistent over time and making those trust deposits, when we take a little bit of a hit, there's still trust in the bank, right? And so I think that's where we get sort of the grace and the empathy from the person maybe that we have negatively affected, and they can see it more in context of the bigger picture rather than, oh, trust is all completely gone. It's just, something weird happened here, something unexpected happened here. Let's talk about it and see if we can start rebuilding that bank account again.
Yeah, but I think that's the big thing, is when you do have that trust, if something happens that is outside of the expectation of that relationship, there's enough trust there to say, what happened there? You know, that felt off. If it repeatedly happens, then it's like, is it worth it?
And I want to say one quick thing too about expectation, right? Because I have this equation. I actually got it from my friend Dr. Jeb Hurley, but it's trust equals expectation plus experience, right? But it's not what I expect of you. So
We
I
lost
expect
David
you
again.
to.
Sorry, David, I just lost you for a second there. You were saying how, and Dr. Jeb Hurley is here.
Oh, Dr. Hurley, so glad you're here. So the idea is, it's not what I expect of you. Like, okay, based on my estimation of you, I expect you to show up this way. I expect you to do this. I expect you to treat me like this. My expectation is based on what you say and what you tell me you stand for, or what you believe in. And when that expectation that you have set, either as an individual or as an organization, doesn't match my experience, that's when there's that mismatch and when there's that gap of trust.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love this as well, because I think, David, when you've explained this to me before, and I also think of reputation. So if you and I don't know each other, but we have a mutual friend, or someone says, "Oh, you should meet David. He's so lovely. He's considerate. He's patient. He's calm." I'm now, there's an expectation set from a reputation standpoint, which will automatically make me trust you. And if I have a different experience of you, that will point to a different trust outcome, if you will.
Oh, lost you for a minute, but yes.
Amazing. There's so many amazing questions and comments coming in here. Thank you, and keep it coming.
I know.
David, is there any you see here?
I know we've missed so many of them, and obviously we can't get to all of them.
Here's one from the illustrious LinkedIn user. Apologies if I wish we knew your identity. Feel free to let us know who you are. It's a LinkedIn setting, by the way, if you do want to change that. Is all trust ultimately self-trust? I ponder this sometimes. I find that the more I trust myself and my ability to handle anything, the easier it is to trust others. I was going to ask you on this, David. I was going to ask, how come we get toxic cultures? Like, how does that happen? And sort of my best guess, I think it links to this question from Mr. User or Miss User, which is, I think, one, when organizations grow to a point where there's abstraction, where we begin to treat human beings not as human beings, but as users behind a Slack channel or as numbers in an Excel sheet. I think that's when we can get dehumanizing cultures where it's impersonal. The only way to scale culture is one leader at a time, one team at a time. The other that I think links nicely to this question, and again, hopefully you can let us know in the chat who's asked this, is the security of the leader. I've found that, sometimes leaders will create cultures where their people lie, fake, and hide, because the leaders themselves are lying, hiding, and faking, and they're not sharing, here are my insecurities, here's where I know I'm good at leading, and here's where I really need help. And I think the more leaders embrace their humanity and share, here's where I'm strong and here's where I'm weak and where I'm taking myself on, that actually inspires your people to do the same. So I think this notion of self-trust, or even security in oneself, allows others to trust you more. And when we're secure in ourselves, we also know our strengths and we know our weaknesses, and we don't try to pretend that we're amazing at everything.
Yeah. It's an interesting way that that person put that, which is like self-trust. The way that I think about it, and I wonder if it matches up with the thought process there, is how do we better learn to lead ourselves as we're leading others?
Mm.
So it's a self-awareness. It's recognizing, what am I doing or how am I showing up that is not allowing me to build that trust or that connection? And how do I work on myself? Not work on myself before I, lead others, because the work on ourselves hopefully is never done. But how do I work on myself as I lead others, and as I have those interactions, or as those things come up, or those unexpected experiences perhaps sort of create that trust gap? How good am I at being aware of and reflecting on what happened, what was my part in it, owning up to my part, not just placing blame on somebody else for creating the gap. And then what are the steps that I can take to bridge that gap, and again, sort of start putting deposits in the bank again. There was one other thing that, as far as how do we get these toxic cultures, how do we get to this point? And I think one of the big things, more recently perhaps, is how many people are now on teams where they have never physically met the person that they're on a Zoom call with, right? You onboard somebody and you've never gotten a chance to shake their hand, or, actually be in their physical space. And the only interaction you have with them is a block on a screen. Like that, I mean, even on smaller teams, that can be dehumanizing if we don't make the effort of getting to know each other and allowing people some time to share something about themselves, and to, bring that personal stuff into those meetings. Because again, when we're remote, you hop on a meeting, it's usually, right, here's the agenda, here's what we're doing, boom, okay, hang up, on to the next call, right? And it's all very focused on the work at hand.
Yeah.
So how do we build in something to make it more human?
Which is, yeah, I mean, what I've been describing is that what we've been missing in working remote is serendipity, right? We don't build relationship and build trust in the meeting when we're talking about the stuff and doing the work. It's
Yeah.
more so in those moments of pause, breaking bread, going for a walk. Like, when you break in the meeting and you go to the pastry table, and both you and I go to grab a cranberry muffin, and you're like, you love cranberry muffins, and I'm like, I love cranberry muffins. Boom, we're cranberry muffin buddies, right? And
Mhm.
it's those moments of serendipity that help build relationship and trust, which we're losing in this remote virtual context. But it's not impossible. We have to just manufacture serendipity, which I know is oxymoronic. But when a leader says meeting starts at 10, but I'm going to hop on at 9:45 just to check in and see how everyone's doing, please join. I've seen
Mhm.
leaders as well on their sort of weekly huddles create like a card system where people flash a card to say how they're feeling. Red, overwhelmed. Green, I'm great, I have capacity. Yellow, as you've taught me, I'm whelmed. I'm not overwhelmed, I'm not underwhelmed, I'm whelmed. And you can get creative. Pink, hungover, whatever it might be. Had too much ginger ale last night.
That'd be me.
Yeah. So there are these hacks and these things that we can create to still develop relationship with one another. Use the chat, use breakout rooms, have team building activities, even if you aren't in person. I'm a real embracer, David, of flexible work. I'm not for, everyone has to be in office 5 days a week. I think it's good to have flexible workplaces, and yet I think we still need to realize that the people on the other side of our screens aren't a function to just do work. They're a human being that we ought to nurture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Hey, Shed, I'm looking over here. I got a bunch of people that have referenced a question by Jem. Gemma, will you retype your question again? Because people are commenting on it, and we haven't addressed it, I don't think. So if you can retype that question, I'd love to.
Thank you. This is a different one we can do. How do you
Yeah.
prove good for business with metrics? Do you need it in order to get buy-in? I know you opened, David, with, there are stats, there's tons of studies, and there's more and more and more coming out there that when we put people and purpose first, it's good for business. So there are
Mhm.
studies, but I also know that you and I are devout followers of the law of diffusion of innovation, which is to find people who already believe in the change. Like I like to describe it as partners, tourists, and prisoners. So I always look for the partners. Who are the people who don't need all the data? They're just leaned in and they believe it and they want to be part of the change, and recruit them and say, what tools. What do you need to bring tourists over into partner land? And the prisoners will either succumb to positive peer pressure or self-select out. But anything more you want to add to that? And then I'll go looking for other questions here as well.
I mean, I'm also sensitive to the fact that there are people who not even skeptical, but just, you know, the way their brain works, right? I mean, you and I have dealt with rooms full of engineers or
actuarial scientists.
Yeah, I mean, those people who just, that's the way they think, and they need that. They're more maybe influenced by data than by their gut feel.
Yep.
Great. I mean, I would say, you know, if that's something that somebody needs, I think I wouldn't rely fully on one or the other, but find the appropriate mix. If you have somebody who really is driven by data and numbers and proof, bring case studies, bring something to show them, and don't forget to throw in the little bit about, you know, the human stuff, the feeling part, you know, have you ever been in a situation when? Because I have to believe that, again, like I said, it's all in there, but for some people, it's just maybe not as pronounced as others. So I would just say find the right balance depending on who you're talking to.
Awesome. And we found who LinkedIn user is. It's Gemma.
It's Gemma.
Amazing.
Love Perfect. Now we just need to find her question.
Amazing questions coming from you, Gemma. There was one further up from LinkedIn user Gemma. There was the Selftrust question, which I love. And there was one other. Here it is. When starting to work with a new team member, should trust be earned, built with time, or given by default from the beginning and regularly assessed? So, I mean, there's a great book called Trust First that was written by a pastor out of Atlanta, a guy who leads City of Refuge, which is an amazing organization. David and I have worked with. I'm forgetting his name. David, we'll remember it. Bruce Deal.
That's the one. Yep.
Deel. Bruce Deal. So Bruce learned that when you trust people who have never been trusted before in their lives, and I'm talking about people who lived in the worst zip code in all of the state of Georgia. And he took a chance on them when no one has taken a chance on them before. And sure, did he get burned sometimes, and did he lose? And absolutely. More 9 times out of 10, if not more, people rise to the occasion. And I think when we give people a ceiling, they meet it. And when we give people a higher ceiling, they meet it as well. And so, Gemma, my experience is that all great leaders start with trust as a default. I have a very close friend who's a senior leader at a large sports retailer that we all know well. And he took over for a new role, a senior role, and he went to the direct reports that he inherited. And he said, hey, here are my non-negotiables. My non-negotiables is that you have weekly performance and support conversations with your direct reports. One of his direct reports just resigned. They said, I'm not going to do that. And he went, like, great. Like, I don't want to force you into anything you don't want to do, but this is my expectation. If you don't do this, I'm not going to trust you. But if you do this, we're good. And so I do think that leaders do extend trust. It's kind of like trust until proven otherwise. And then when proven otherwise, that's when you have an intervention and a conversation about that trust.
Yeah, I think, you know, to your point, I would agree that for me, it's number 2, trust first. And yeah, you are going to get burned. You are going to get screwed over every once in a while. And I think, I mean, to me though, I think of, it's sort of like, you could never drive a car because you might get into a fender bender, right? Or you might get that curb rash on your brand new rims. Does that mean you're going to sit home and never drive your car? No, because the chances of those things happening are so minor in relation to the rest of the experience that you're going to have, that to me, it's worth it. You know, I will take the risk to trust somebody first, and I'll get screwed every once in a while. And I'm okay with that, because I would rather, me personally, I would rather live my life with an abundance mindset, with a trust mindset, with a, I want to help you and lift you up mindset. And if I get screwed every once in a while, I accept that risk.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like we might have a couple rogue LinkedIn users here. So I just think Gemma and all, to close the loop on the self-trust piece, I mean, I would never want to work for a leader that doesn't trust themselves. that is an insecure leader, and it's not going to work well. There is no mistake that every single leadership development program that I've ever seen or participated in, David, I'm assuming you can attest to this, everyone all starts with a module called leading self leadership, know thyself. Like there's the golden rule, then there's the platinum rule. Golden rule is do unto others the way you wish to be treated, which is very kindergarten and has zero empathy. I'm a big believer in the platinum rule. Treat others the way they wish to be treated, which is if I treated David the way I want to be treated, that's not going to work so well. Like David is a different person. For me, the value is trying to understand what does David care about and how might I be able to flex to meet him and his needs. That's how we build trust in a deeper relationship. And so I think, this is why we have things like the DISC profile and Myers-Briggs and Enneagram. And Jonathan Fields came out with a new one called Spark Type and Strengths Finder and the why discovery process. Like all these things are to know ourselves better such that we can better learn about others and lead them better. There's also a wonderful standard in the U.S. Marines of all places that in order to effectively lead another, you have to have affection toward them. I love this because affection, and take it out of the sort of intimate context of the word, affection means I see genius in the other person. I see strength, value, and merit in that other human being. If you as a leader cannot find strength and genius in someone that you're leading, I have news for you. You aren't fit to lead them, which means that somebody else could be fit to lead them, or maybe they aren't a fit or an add to the culture and to the organization. But I love that standard.
It's great.
Amazing. Some more stuff coming in here. Love this interaction. Thank you all. Here's a good one. I hope this is the one you wanted as well, David, but if not, we'll pick another one in a second. From Jackie, How do you cultivate pride and engagement even when things may not be going well? Ooh, I have a fun story on this. Do you want to DM and I'll add?
Yeah. So engagement is an interesting thing, and it relates to pride in my mind as well. So follow me here for just a second. I might take you on a little bit of a wander. There is a guy by the name of help me out, Shed. It's Leader Factor.
Timothy Clark.
That's the one. So Tim Clark, I love his definition of engagement. His engagement, or his definition of engagement is the ability to express yourself, both physically, emotionally, and cognitively. So when you are able at work to express yourself, that means you're engaged. If you think about when things are not going well, what does it often look like? Right? It's things aren't going well. I've got a strategy. This is what we're going to do. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. And it's got to be done by this time and this time and this time, or else we're going to, lose clients or go out of business or whatever. And it becomes very one directional oftentimes. And we don't feel like we can express ourselves. Hey, I have an idea. I don't think that'll work. I'm a little bit worried. I think we might be going in the wrong direction. Right? So I think when things are not going well, it's natural, I think, for a lot of leaders to feel like it's my responsibility. I'm accountable for this, this team, for this organization, for whatever it is. And they take that burden on themselves. And because they do that, then it becomes a little more command and control because, we're sort of under the gun. I think in times like that, if we can slow down, and again, in the words of our friend Peter Docker, rather than react, we can pause and respond and harness the collective genius and figure out, okay, we've got an issue. I can either work on it with my one brain, or we can talk about it as a team and see what other ideas and opinions and things that I might not have even thought about, especially if I'm under pressure. What other things might come out? That invites engagement. That invites pride. And when you figure it out together as a team, oh my gosh, like when you come through a crisis together, that's one of the greatest things that you can have as a story for your team.
Love it. So I'm just putting the question up here again. I have a couple of things to add as well. And then really loving all the engagement here. Engagement. It's making me feel proud. So Jackie, what I'll add as well. So I see culture shifting with 3 gears that are interconnected: mindset, actions, and systems. And you need all 3. So, mindset. I, I've seen, leaders come out that we're now, people first, purpose first. And I want to know, what was the transformation that happened? All transformation is an inside out job. Are you simply now saying it because that's what the market wants and it's convenient? Like that business roundtable announcement a few years ago that said, we're now putting shareholders lower on the list and it's other stakeholders first. That was more of a response to market pressure and what customers and employees and even investors are beginning to look at. Because let's look at who they picked as the spokespeople for the business roundtable announcement. One of them was the CEO of Johnson and Johnson, who was just being sued for $572 million for their participation in the opioid crisis. So how are they being purpose and people first? So one, I think leaders truly need to transform and have a mindset shift, or truly believe something in order for something to happen. The next lever is actions. And our friend David Marquet, who wrote the book Turn the Ship Around, has an amazing story of how you can act your way to new thinking. You can actually create actions or systems that can change a mindset. So David Marquet took command over a U.S. Navy nuclear-powered sub called the Santa Fe, which was the worst-rated ship in the entire fleet. And he wanted to create pride on board the Santa Fe. And so he taught everyone on board that anytime there was a guest on board their submarine, they were to say, hello, this is my name. This is what I do on the ship. This is my title or role. Welcome aboard the Santa Fe. He taught everyone to do that. And the reason he taught everyone to do that is every now and then a guest on the ship was an evaluator. And so when you had an evaluator go through, and this was the only ship in the entire US Navy fleet that built in this protocol, by the end, the evaluator said, wow, people feel like they're really proud to be here. They weren't necessarily, they were just told to act in a certain way that sort of mimicked this feeling of pride. But when they got this feeling back, they were like, yeah, we do feel proud to be part of this crew. The last one is systems, that if you put a good person in a bad environment or a bad system, the environment or system prevails every single time. So I get a kick out of working with sales teams, for an example, where they say, we really value collaboration. And 100% of our people's commission is, or 100% of people's compensation is based on commission. like that's antithetical. Like if you value collaboration, well, then maybe you'll create 40% of it as a shared pool or even more, and bonuses on individual results for the last 30 or 40. So mindset, actions, and systems are, I think, how we change and create trust there. So we can act our way to new thinking, Jackie. Cool. David, a couple other questions here, and then we can begin to land this plane if we like. And thank you for your time. And hey, Alex Harris, thanks for making your LinkedIn user known. We have a question here from Andrea. Love it. What kind of, apologies if it's Andrea or Andrea. I think it's Andrea. What kind of conversation does a team need to have to sustain trust when the leader don't build it? DM.
That was the question I was gonna pick, and I don't even have an answer in my head. So give me a second. What kind of conversation does a team need to have to sustain trust when the leader doesn't build it? Oh, okay. So I have a thought, and you'll build on it, of course. In my mind, so I for the last couple of years, I can't say I've done in-depth study, but I do a daily reading of Stoic philosophy, right? And the Stoics were like the Greeks and the Roman philosophers, and these people that thought a lot about things that are still absolutely relevant today. One of the things that is one of the sort of the foundational principles of Stoic philosophy is being really clear on what is in our control and what is not in our control. So in this particular scenario, we cannot control what our boss does, or anybody else for that matter, whether they build trust, whether they create an environment of belonging or inclusion or engagement or any of those things. We have no control over what they do. What we have total control over is what we do. So in my mind, trust is a very individual sport. And again, going back to what we've talked about before, when we choose to take that risk and trust first. And it doesn't have to be like open the floodgates all at once, especially if we're not in a position of authority, or if we haven't been at the company for very long, we don't know people very well. I get it. It's hard and it's going to take some time, but what can we do to sort of just take that one step forward? And what can we do to build the influence that we create? And when we go first, when we show some vulnerability, when we trust first, when we ask for help, when we tell people that, we're struggling with something, that starts something, and people realize, oh, they did that, which makes me feel a little bit safer doing that myself. And we can influence based on what we do, but we should never just sit back on our hands and say, well, until the leader figures it out, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah. Something I'll just add here. Thanks, David. I love that. Something I'll add here. I'm just putting up Andrea's question again. Is, I mean, I think when it comes to leadership and culture, there are a few issues that we fall into. One is we haven't adequately defined what it means to lead. And if we don't have a definition of good leaders, how are we then going to select good leaders? I find that we often select and promote based on performance and not based on someone's actual desire and ability to lead, to be a good people leader, to care, to nurture, to have vision, to support, to even have courage and decisiveness. So we need to define leadership. We need to select leaders against a definition. I love from Rich Diviney, leaders are not born, leaders are not even made. Leaders are chosen based on the way that they behave. And even from our colleague Simon Sinek, that leaders aren't the ones who are in charge. Leaders are the ones who take care of those in their charge. That leadership is about people. And if we promote people because they're the most driven, the most responsible, the highest performing, we might get high performing toxic cultures. So I have some empathy for those leaders, because the third issue is we don't support leaders. There's on average a 12-year gap between when someone gets their first management role and when they get formal management training. And that's from HBR. This 12-year gap, that's like making someone a parent and not teaching them anything until their child's 12. Good luck, or that parent not going out of their way to try to learn and improve, because parenting is hard and parenting is a practice. And the same is true of leadership. I don't think there's a better comparison of leadership than parenthood, by all means. So when you have a leader that doesn't build trust, I have a little bit of empathy for them. Like, maybe they're over promoted. Like, I don't think many people wake up in the morning and are like, I'm going to make my team's existence a living hell today. I don't think that's most leaders. I don't think that's most people. But I think a couple things. One, when you don't have top cover from a great leader, you're still allowed to choose to be a leader and to take care of the people to the left and right of you. I've seen many teams that have a poor leader, but who are very close and look out for each other. And then the other is you can begin to sort of Jedi mind trick that oftentimes these leaders who aren't good at building trust are dominant command and control micromanagers. And you can kind of sort of make it their own idea that things could be done differently and be made easier for them. And what do you think of? And, bring some ideas up that kind of make it their own idea. And help them Jedi mind trick become a better leader who builds better trust. But absent of that, to David's point, focus on what is actually in your control. Cool. DM, anything else in the chat here, or anything else that's come to mind that you want to chat about before we begin to close? And yes, Sasha, it's a 12-year gap between that first management job and actual formal management training. And by the way, the management training doesn't need to be multi-$100,000 sophisticated leadership program. It can be a good book like The Speed of Trust, or all of these books that we've mentioned in our conversation in the chat here. Turn the Ship Around, and read a chapter or read 3 and come together and have an internal book club. Boom, you have a leadership development program. And it costs $19.95 a head.
I mean, to that point too, I think a lot of times we talk about this and people have so much going on already, and they think, I just can't do more than I'm currently doing. And because we feel like it has to be some big initiative, or it has to be some long program, or it has to be, super well thought out. So to your point, just start, just do anything. Read a book, form a book club, start the first 5 minutes of your meeting talking about why the company exists, or talking about, what's important to people on whatever it is, like just to get a conversation going about leadership and culture is better than not doing anything at all. And make it frictionless would be what I would say.
Nice. And the thing I love about culture as well is the tail can wag the dog. Meaning if you spend your entire life and career, meaning like if only they change, if only they, nothing's going to happen, or you're totally handing over all of your power to other people. But those amongst us who are leaders begin to point the fingers at ourselves and say, what can I do? And if you decide to make the living and working experience of the people to the left, right, above, and below better because they work with you and know you, well, chances are the people to the left, right, above, and below you, or you, will get a promotion one of these days, whether it's within the company or another company. And all of a sudden they'll say, I want to bring David with me. He helped me so much. He gave me honest feedback. I totally trust him. I want to build something with him. And so, instead of trying to influence others to become it, I think we can choose to become it ourselves.
I'll say, just add to that one thing that sort of gets into the hippy dippy realm a little bit, but I mean, none of this stuff really has anything to do. I shouldn't say that. None of this stuff is exclusively related to work. This is human stuff. Like how much of the stuff that we've talked about today is completely irrelevant to all of our other relationships. It's the same thing, right? It's all relevant. It's just how we interact with people. How do we build trust and human connection with all of the human beings that we interact with? And not just the people we see every day or have deep relationships with or familial relationships with, but like, how do we help the barista feel better about themselves? How do we lift them up? How do we connect? How do we make some sort of human connection with them? I mean, we live in the most technologically connected time in the history of human civilization. And yet, despite that, feelings of loneliness and isolation have doubled since the 1980s. Like, it matters for every single interaction we have, even the single service ones.
Yeah, we live in the seemingly most connected world, but what technology might be good at in speeding a transaction, access to information. I mean, the ability to, like, if it weren't for technology, we wouldn't be doing this. But this is not nearly as effective as building a relationship. That's when, pick up the phone, get together in person in a safe and responsible way, which is becoming more safe and responsible, fortunately. But absolutely, DM. And this points to what Alejandro asked before: is trust different at work than it is at home? And I know there's a quote that you love, David, that if you're a different person at home than you are at work, in one of those places, you're at least one of those places, you're probably lying. I think we should be the same person everywhere, because business is personal. One last question here, and then we will wrap this up. What are the best techniques for building trust when entering an organization that has a culture of micromanagement? Cultural changes seem to take a long time when it comes to turning the ship around, especially in the case where trust was previously compromised. I got a couple ideas. David, do you want me to start and tackle it and you can add on, or vice versa?
Yeah, go ahead.
So first and foremost, I mean, if you are entering a culture of micromanagement, did you know that before you entered, and do you want to be a part of that? And I'm a really big believer now more than ever, the power is in our hands as employees. There is a labor talent shortage because of the great resignation and the great talent swap, that there's more power now in our hands when we're choosing employers than there have been traditionally. And I think it behooves us to ask really good questions, like, what's it like to work here? Tell me about your least favorite boss and your most favorite boss. Tell me about your least favorite project, your most favorite project. Like interview them as much as they're interviewing you. But again, I think if it comes to having this culture of micromanagement, how how can you make little tweaks, little, not huge sweeping, especially if you're new. Hey, I'm new here. I've seen this work in other places. What if, and just try a little bit, try a little bit, try a little bit, try a little bit. And either it'll make a transformation over time, one brick at a time, or it won't, and you'll stick out like a sore thumb and you'll go find a part of the culture or a different one where there's more empowerment and less micromanagement. DM?
I mean, this is why we share a brain, because I was going to say the exact same thing. Just start small and recognize and be patient with the fact that depending on the size of the organization or the team or how bad things are, it's going to take some time to turn that ship around. Be patient with yourself, be patient with others who show up every day and expect that, and they're used to that sort of that environment. But start small, do the little things. People can feel when it feels better, right? And they might not even be able to put it into words or describe it, but if you're intentional and conscious about doing these little things that are making a little bit of a difference. Who is it? It's James Clear. He wrote the book Atomic Habits, but he says if you make a 1 degree change and you get 1%, sorry, 1% change. If you get 1% better at something for an entire year, you're 37 times better by the end of the year. So don't try to do it all at 100%. Make a 1% change every day or every week, whatever it is. It adds up over time.
Yeah. And I mean, I again, this notion of the tail can wag the dog. I've seen teams and leaders in the middle of huge organizations decide to do things differently, and they can transform an entire organization from the middle, right? And this is how it happens. Me and David in the middle of a company say, let's do it this way. Let's see how much we can get away with before, people notice. And we decide to put our purpose and our people first, and we become a little bit of a microcosm of the organization that is amazing. And people want to show up to work, and they give discretionary effort, and they tell their friends within the company and outside of the company, and everyone wants to work on this team. And in time, our traditional results look better. And then senior leaders pay attention and go, what are you doing differently here? Oh, we're putting our people and purpose first. Can we do that? Sure. Can you teach us? Yeah. Want a promotion? I'll think about it. That indeed the tail can wag the dog here. I love this from my dear friend Stuart Hayes. How we treat those who can't do anything for us shows to others if we can be trusted. That came from your dad. I love that, Stuart. David, everyone, this has been awesome. We've hit the hour mark. I've so appreciated David, you showing up and sharing so openly, sparking these conversations. Everyone who joined us today, thank you so much. And if you're listening to the recording and you made it this far, great. That's really good. This was awesome. DM, any closing words before we say goodbye today?
This stuff matters. I mean, I just encourage you to make a habit of it, whatever that looks like. Pull as you feel yourself getting pulled into the sort of mediocrity of how business usually goes. Don't let yourself get sucked into that. We're all able to do a little bit more and to incorporate more of this trust and connection and make a difference in the lives of the people that we work with and that we influence. It matters so much, especially at a time like this when people are just thirsty for it.
Amazing. I agree. This is just where it's at. When we make the people around us better, life and career is simply more fulfilling. So David, thank you for joining us and helping us do that. Thank you all for being here with us today. And we'll get some. This is Depeche Mode.
Is it?
Spotify says it's Depeche Mode.
Well, not my favorite Depeche Mode song.
Thank you all for joining us today. Hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.